Hey, Daily Dosers, this is Pastor Larry here, and we're taking a look for a couple of weeks at God's Hall of Faith. Stories of men and women who walked by faith. And then in Hebrews chapter 11, they are listed one by one with their brief synopsis of their story. Now, in Hebrews chapter 11, we're told what faith is. At its irreducible minimum, it has two things. We've got to believe that God exists, and we've got to believe that He rewards those who diligently seek Him. I like to put it in modern day language that faith is trusting God enough to do what He says, trusting God enough that there really is a God, and when He tells us to do something, He will reward us for doing the right thing. But therein lies a common problem. We often superimpose this concept, I will reward you immediately. And that's not what Scripture promises. It promises a great reward of salvation, a great reward of all eternity. Many of us in this lifetime get our reward right now, but they are simply the hors d'oeuvres of the great banquet of heaven. And the simple fact is, sometimes we don't get the reward we want. That's what I looked at in my message this last weekend, that sometimes doing the right thing actually can bring in the short term the wrong result. And the very first story we have here in Hebrews 11 is about a guy who experienced that. He doesn't get a lot of press. We don't talk about him a lot when we go through Hebrews chapter 11 because of what happened to him. But it's an incredibly important story. His name is Abel. He was a brother of Cain. They were two sons of Adam and Eve. And in Genesis chapter 3, you have the fall of Adam and Eve as they disobey God's command, and they are driven out of the Garden of Eden, and sin enters this world, which still is our great nemesis to this day. And the very first story to show how bad sin is one brother kills another brother. But let me tell you what happens here. God had said, I want you to sacrifice an animal whose death is going to be a substitute for your death, which is what you deserve for your sin. So it was like an interest-only payment. It didn't get rid of the sin. It just covered it for a period of time. And those sacrifices were to continue clear up until the time where Jesus would pay off the balance, when He cries out, it is finished, meaning paid in full on the cross. But until then, this is what was to be done. Well, Cain, Abel's brother, was a farmer, and he decided to bring some of, by the way, not the best even, but just some of his fruits and vegetables, and God rejected it. Well, he got all ticked off about that, and God shows up to him and says, listen, sin is crouching at the door. It's ready to overtake you. You better do, and you have the opportunity to do, the right thing. But instead of doing the right thing, what he did, he's called his brother Abel out in the field, and he killed him. Now, again, that's not what I expect as my reward. I expect my reward, everything to go great in this life and to do it pretty quickly. But from the beginning of the Bible all the way through to the end, there's an important message. And that is that God is absolutely faithful to reward us. But let's understand what that reward is. Only hors d'oeuvres, as I said, in this life. The banquet is in the next life. And when for weeks, months, years, decades, even a lifetime, things aren't working out as we had hoped, the temptation from the enemy is to say, well, God, you're not rewarding me, so I'm going to take things into my own hands, and I'm going to live out my own way. And whenever we do that, we inevitably end up destroying our lives, destroying our future, destroying our eternity. You see, to walk by faith means to trust God enough to do what He says, because we trust Him to be that great rewarder. And here's my encouragement for you today. Walk in faith, trusting God enough to do what He says, even when the short-term outcome isn't what you expected. That's what Cain did. That's what Abel did. What we do too often is what Cain did. Nah, I got my own way. So please, let's walk like Abel, trusting God enough to do what He says. You will be glad you did.